Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
I had seen enough. I decided to take action. My stomach twisted into a knot, but somehow, I managed to pull myself together. I walked over to the closet, pulled out a small suitcase and a larger one. I swiftly and silently packed my clothes into the larger bag, gathering all my belongings in less than a minute. I moved to the dresser, grabbed all the underwear, and stuffed everything, including undershirts, into the smaller suitcase. Next, I went to the sock drawer, managing to grab 2 large handfuls when I heard Lila yell, "Sorry to bother you." I apologized, quickly stuffing the socks into the suitcase. "I'll be gone in a few minutes, and you can go back to letting Caleb, as you so colorfully described it, have his fun." "It's not what it seems," Lila said, visibly upset. "Caleb is just a friend. He's going to leave now. We need to talk, honey." Lila, looking distraught, urged Caleb to leave. Caleb seemed to agree that exiting the room was wise, but he had no clothes on. Walking around naked in front of an angry man is usually considered poor judgment, so Caleb pulled the sheet up to his chin. I noticed my old Ruger .22 caliber revolver in my desk drawer as I finished gathering the last handful of socks. I had forgotten it was there. I had placed it in the drawer so long ago that it had slipped from my memory. Realizing I must not have worn some of my socks often enough, I grabbed the gun, turned to face my wife and her lover. I walked to the bed and sat next to Lila, holding the weapon in my hand. As I sat there, I realized that there were some quick solutions to a rather confusing situation. "Lila," I said, "it looks like you and Caleb have been having a little too much fun. Could you point out which part one misinterpreted?" "Good heavens, Eric. Have you been here this long?" Lila gasped. "I can't deny what you've seen or heard, but that doesn't mean I love you any less. It was just a silly affair, Eric. It meant nothing to me." Lila sobbed as she spoke. "It seems to me, Caleb, that you should be a little disturbed by my loving wife's latest statement," I responded. "It seems we both mean a hell of a lot to Lila. Maybe our performance in bed leaves much to be desired. Perhaps she has someone else who satisfies her better, and you and I are just substitutes, only useful when she can't find a real stud." "Eric, don't say that," Lila cried, looking at me through tear-filled eyes. "You're my only love and the best lover in the world. Please, put the gun down and let Caleb go. We can talk this through ourselves. There's no need to involve Caleb in our private issues." I looked at Lila, hearing her plea. "Well, Lila, I think there's a very good reason you and Caleb have an intimate relationship," I said coldly. "You don't need me moping around, interfering with your hot monkey sex." Lila had already started sobbing uncontrollably, and Caleb seemed to be in distress. I lowered the gun next to Lila and stood up. For a moment, I thought about using the revolver on myself, but I knew the .22 caliber would only cause damage, not death. It could blind me or result in some other painful, but non-lethal injury. I didn't need to rush my death. It was always an option, but a permanent one. I would never hurt Lila, and what was Caleb to me anyway? Lila was an attractive woman and could always find another lover. I had been giving in to my own desires for 20 years, but this situation wasn't as dire as it felt. I zipped up the second bag and stood to leave. I turned my back to the bed, ready to walk away. Then I heard it, the unmistakable sound of a dry fire, the noise made when an empty chamber in the revolver clicks after firing. I always kept the empty chamber aligned with the firing pin for safety. I hadn't heard the gun cocking as I was packing my bag, but I knew that if the gun was cocked again, it would fire. Before I could react, I heard the distinct sound of the revolver's trigger being pulled back. Without even looking at the bed, I rushed toward the doorway. I almost made it out, but as I turned left down the stairs, something hit my forehead. The pain was somewhere between a sharp bite and a hammer strike. Instinctively, I dropped the bag from my left hand. Blood was already dripping into my left eye, and when I touched my forehead, I felt more blood and a swelling bump. My head was spinning, but fear pushed me to move faster. I managed to navigate the stairs mostly by memory, but when I reached the front door, I struggled to open it. My hand was covered in blood, and I couldn't get a good grip. I looked around in a panic and realized that the suitcase in my hand was only half closed. I grabbed a sock and used it to wipe the blood off the handle enough to turn it. I ran to my car and sped away, driving as fast as I could. Every few minutes, I pulled another sock from my bag to wipe the blood from my eyes so I could see. Getting shot in the head was far less painful than the time spent in the emergency room. The questions were endless. Everything from the name of my insurance company to who might have shot me. In the end, the small bullet was easily removed from under my skin, and a few stitches were placed. That was the easy part. The police were called because of the shooting, and I had to give them the unpleasant details. I explained that I'd been feeling bad at work and came home early, only to catch my wife, an accountant, in a compromising position. I told them how I had briefly considered ending it all, but ultimately put the gun down and tried to leave. "Mr. Jones, who shot you?" the officer asked. "Did you actually see the shooter?" "I didn't see who did it, but for you, officer, I've narrowed it down to 2 suspects," I replied sarcastically. "You'll have to take it from there." "Do you believe your wife is capable of shooting you?" he pressed. "Try finding out that your wife of 23 years has been sleeping with your accountant," I said bitterly. "Then ask her if she's capable of shooting you. You'll suddenly realize you don't know who she is or what she might do." "To answer your question, it's a real possibility," I admitted, feeling resigned. I was still in the emergency room, wondering why they were stitching up my head when the bleeding had already stopped. I noticed the doctor who had treated me was showing my chart to another man in a white coat, and I guess they were debating whether I even had a brain. The policeman stepped back, and the doctor approached me, his demeanor serious. "Mr. Jones, I'm concerned about your heart," he said. "You mentioned feeling tired and nauseous lately. I strongly urge you to stay here so we can run some tests to determine the severity of your condition. It may turn out that being in the hospital today saved your life." I groaned in frustration. "Butter my ass and call me a biscuit. I'm a lucky bastard. Lucky my accountant slept with my wife. Lucky I came home early and caught them, and lucky one of them shot me in the head. Everything's going great, Doc. Let's just get this over with while I'm on a roll." Turns out, the head wound didn't bother me much. Within a couple of days, I was being prepped for quadruple bypass surgery. Lila tried to visit me before the surgery and again while I was recovering, but I refused to see her. Both of my children were incredible. My son, Max, took a leave of absence from his job in Texas and flew down to be with me while I recovered. My daughter, Lisa, attended a local university and became my advocate while I was unconscious. It's always wise to have someone you trust looking out for you in the hospital. Even Lila's parents came and spent time with me. I was bombarded with advice from everyone. They all believed I needed to sit down with Lila and discuss the situation, what they euphemistically referred to as the situation. I held out for a few days, but eventually, I agreed. I insisted that our children and Lila's parents be present. I wanted everyone to understand my reasoning and my position. The kids brought me home from the hospital, and Lila and her parents met us in the living room. It was the first time I had seen Lila since that day, and the fact that it had been so long brought me some satisfaction. I sat on the couch, with the kids on either side of me. Lila sat across from me in a chair, and her parents sat on the love seat to my left. Lila started the conversation with what I thought were some rather foolish questions. "Eric, how could you suggest to the police that I might have been the one to shoot you? I would never hurt you, honey. You should know that after all these years. I love you," she confessed. "Why didn't you let me visit you in the hospital? I should be the one by your side, helping you recover." Before I could answer, Lisa spoke up. "Let me answer that, Dad," she said. "Mom, you betrayed Dad in the marital bed. He never thought you were capable of that. When he realized what you could do, he realized he had no idea what you were capable of. That's when he told the police what he did. You would have caused him even more stress if you'd been allowed to see him before or after the surgery. He needs love and understanding, not a cheating wife." I was surprised by how well Lisa understood my train of thought. Why didn't Lila understand this already, without having to ask such ridiculous questions? Lila didn't take kindly to Lisa's blunt words. "I'm still your mother, and I don't appreciate you speaking to me like that," she protested. "You should have thought about that before you committed yourself to this man," Lila's mother shot back. "You haven't earned your daughter's respect. You did a terrible thing, so don't act like you're above a good scolding." Lila was taken aback when her mother lashed out at her with such force. She had probably expected her parents to be supportive or, at the very least, neutral. "Okay, I made a terrible mistake. It only happened once, and Eric caught me. I'm ashamed and embarrassed by what I did. But that doesn't mean I don't love Eric with all my heart," Lila pleaded. "I made a terrible error in judgment, and I want to atone for it." "Mom, is this family some kind of revival religion where you stand up and admit your sins and get forgiveness?" Max asked. "Maybe Dad could baptize you and wash away your sins, and your memories too. Is that really how you think it's supposed to work?" Lila asked, but everyone seemed to pounce on her. I have to admit, I enjoyed it more than I should have. Her parents and kids were really giving it to her. I spent most of my time thinking about how I could get revenge. What better way to do that than by attacking her closest blood relatives? "No, Max," Lila exclaimed, her voice rising. "I don't have an answer except that I know your father is a wonderful, gentle, loving husband and father. I just hope that my absolute remorse and my love for him means something. I really need him, and I think he needs me. Well, honey, I finally spoke, and the sarcasm was thick in my voice. Do you belong to Caleb now? I wouldn't want you to be an Indian giver or anything like that. Whoever is the better man takes the spoils of victory. I lied. It was just a joke. Really, meant to cut through the tension. No one owns me or my body parts, except you, darling, Lila responded. I'm willing to give you everything I have, everything I am. If you'll forgive me, why should I believe you didn't mean what you said to Caleb? I shot back. I think you were sincere, but you called me a lying, cheating Eric. Now you want things to be different? You're trying to make me tell the truth. You're contradicting yourself. Am I a liar? Or am I telling the truth? Lila reasoned. I'd bet on a liar. You don't have a very strong argument, I replied coldly. You tell me you lie to men, and Caleb was just another victim. How many men have you been with? Do you have a list? Are they all homicidal maniacs? Is there anyone else waiting to put a bullet in my forehead? Between you and that damn quack doctor, there's not much left of my heart. There's barely anything worth hitting. Eric, I swear Caleb was the one, Lila said, her voice desperate. And to be honest, you caught us the second time we were together. I had no idea he was such a tightwad. He literally wet the bed when you pulled the gun out of the drawer. When you put it on the floor, he grabbed it as fast as he could. Bringing a loaded gun to a man who's scared to death is not the smartest thing you could have done. Well, pardon me for not having a manual on what to do when you catch your wife having fun with another man in your bed. I shot back. I had no idea what to do. Why hadn't we considered this possibility earlier? You should have known you were a cheater. What were you planning when I caught you? I demanded, my voice sharp. Honestly, I never thought it would happen. But if there's ever a next time, please just shoot me, Lila replied, her voice hollow. It would be so much better than going through this nightmare. My own parents and children have no respect for me, and the only man I love unconditionally despises me. I almost got you killed. A bullet to the head would have been kinder. Though I deserve to suffer, I know it. For a moment, there was silence. I don't think any of us realized the toll it was taking on Lila. Her life had turned into a living hell, and the thought of that brought me a strange sense of satisfaction. I don't think there's much else to discuss. I finally broke the silence. I'm divorcing you, Lila. I don't have a choice. I have terms and conditions. Get a good lawyer, because I'm going to make sure you're held accountable. I have to do this to maintain some self-respect. My lawyer will be in touch. The kids have already found some apartments for me to look at, and our first meeting is in a few minutes. You broke my heart, Lila, and even the doctors couldn't fix it. Goodbye. Lila just bowed her head, sobbing. Her parents walked me and the kids to the door without a word. It was frustrating, but at the same time, it felt oddly fitting. Funny how things turn out. If I hadn't been shot in the head and sent to the hospital, I probably would have died within a couple of weeks, if not less. That's what the doctors told me. In a twisted way, I realized that Lila's affair had probably saved my life, even if it was the worst thing that had ever happened to me. Thankfully, I had a good job and excellent insurance. Lila started working part-time at a department store after the kids left home, but her income was minimal. My attorney made an offer to Lila's legal advisor for an unfair, totally unacceptable settlement. We had to start somewhere, and we could always negotiate later. I was stunned when my lawyer told me that Lila had agreed to the settlement, despite her lawyer's advice. We still had a mortgage on the house, which Lila would never be able to afford on her own. I was getting the lion's share of the savings and equity, and she wouldn't receive any alimony. It seemed impossible for Lila to survive on her own. I was certain of it. Then, like something out of a movie, another stroke of luck came my way. I bought a lottery ticket, and it turned out to be worth several $1,000,000. At first, I was excited, but quickly became fearful that Lila might get her hands on some of it. I kept the ticket a secret, carrying it around in my wallet, often pulling it out when I was alone to hold it, obsessing over what it could buy me. As time passed, the loneliness began to grow, and the pleasure I once got from holding the winning ticket started to fade. I realized that I had already earned all the money I needed, especially now that I was about to be a bachelor. So why was I feeling more miserable, even with the newfound wealth? Money was no longer the issue. I took a week off and went fishing on the Delaware River, spending most of my time on the water, fishing and thinking. After dark, I would drink beer and keep thinking. By the end of the week, I had formulated a plan. Lila's parents agreed to meet me at my apartment on Sunday night. They were sworn to secrecy, not to tell anyone that I had invited them over. Mark, I have a favor to ask you, I began, addressing my father-in-law. If you can't honor my request, could you at least keep what I'm about to tell you a closely guarded secret? I think I can agree to that, Eric, unless it's something that must be disclosed to save a life or something like that, Mark replied. I bought a lottery ticket a couple of months ago. It's worth a little over $4 million if I take the annuity, I said. That's great for you, Eric. Congratulations. What do you need from us? Are you asking us not to tell Lila? Mark asked, his tone suddenly dejected. Yes, Mark. She must never find out that I bought the ticket, I insisted. Eric, you're putting us in a difficult position. You see that, don't you? Nina, my mother-in-law, asked. Not really, Nina, I replied. I want you to tell Lila that you bought the ticket. I want you to divide it between Lila and the children, each getting a third. But please, don't tell anyone that I bought the ticket. No one will question you giving it to your daughter and grandchildren. It's perfectly legal, and it will help the children, plus save Lila's life. Nina had tears running down her cheeks, and Mark cleared his throat and stared out the window. It didn't take much to realize that my offer had deeply touched them. I felt better than I had in ages, especially since the day I came home early and found Lila in bed with someone else. This felt like the first step toward emotional healing. Eric, we'll gladly go along with your plan, Mark said with a smirk. You know, Lila's been staying in more and working longer hours just to keep up with the mortgage. She really knows she messed up, and it's not about the money. Mark wasn't one to speak much. He had spent 25 years as a firefighter in New York City, and he got straight to the point. His daughter's actions hurt him and Nina almost as much as they hurt me. A week later, I received the most bizarre news from my attorney. Lila, my soon-to-be ex-wife, had contacted her lawyer, telling him that she had extra income to declare, and that I was entitled to half of it. What kind of lawyer did she have? I instructed my lawyer to inform her attorney that I would not accept any share, and that she could keep everything. When the divorce hearing came, we were at an impasse over the distribution of the lottery money. Both sides refused to compromise. My lawyer even suggested he might drop my case because it was damaging his reputation as a tough negotiator. He smiled when he said it. The judge, however, was shocked by the ongoing dispute. He said, I've never seen such a fight over money in a divorce. It makes me question whether a divorce is necessary. Perhaps counseling or an open dialogue between the parties would help resolve this. He told our attorneys to keep working on a settlement and to reconsider in a month. He also encouraged Lila and me to have a conversation as soon as possible. I left the courtroom feeling completely confused. Lila's parents had attended the hearing, and Mark approached me in the parking lot. Eric, I'm asking you as a favor to stop by the house right now. We'll have a sandwich, each have a beer, and try to work things out. You two are the most stubborn people I've ever seen, he said before leaving without waiting for my reply. When I rang the bell at their house, Lila opened the door. She looked pale but otherwise fine. She barely made eye contact as she led me into the kitchen, where her parents had laid out cold cuts and everything needed for sandwiches that could last a week. Mark handed me a cold beer. Eric, I want to speak first, Lila began. My parents bought the winning lottery ticket and gave it to me and the kids to split. You already know you're entitled to half of my share, since we were still married when we cashed it in. She paused for a moment. I have a selfish reason for wanting you to get your half. It will help me forgive myself for the terrible mistake I made toward you. I know you can't forgive me, but I can't forgive myself either. And it really, really hurts, Lila said, her voice breaking. It's not about the money, Eric. It's about finally doing something right and fair to you. You deserve better than I gave you. Please accept the money, and I'll agree to the divorce. You'll be free of me. Mark and Nina watched me closely, waiting for my response. I thought about it for a long time. I don't think money should be tied to forgiveness, Lila. What you did was terrible, but it's over now. If you'll just accept the money and agree to the terms of the divorce, I'll get closure. If it helps, I forgive you. It took some time and more than one beer, but I do forgive you. I wish it had never happened, but we can't change the past. I loved you, Lila. I still do, but I can't trust you, so I can't stay married to you. I don't want you to lose your home or suffer because of me. I'm not proud of it, but the rest of the agreement is in my favor, so just accept the money your parents gave you. I won't do that, Eric, Lila said, her voice rising with drama. I'll fight this all the way to the Supreme Court if I have to. For heaven's sake, Mark shouted, shocking everyone. This is so pathetic. I can't stand it. Lila screwed up and broke your heart. You can't stay married to a cheater, and that's exactly what she is. Lila needs some damn absolution before she'll agree to the divorce. Does that make sense? Mark continued as Lila and I silently nodded. Here's my suggestion. Take it for what it's worth. Lila, give the poor guy a divorce and keep his dignity. He deserves that. After the divorce, go on with your lives, separate for good, and stop this toxic mess. Lila, you've had your chance, but you need to face what you've done. Lila wiped her eyes, her expression a mix of regret and determination. I can't fix everything, Eric, but I'm ready to let you go and take responsibility for my actions. You deserve better than this. Mark gave a heavy sigh but nodded. That's the right choice, Lila. You messed up, but it's time to move forward. This marriage can't survive, but that doesn't mean you both have to be stuck in this misery. With a resigned but calm expression, I turned to Lila. I still care about you, but we can't go back. We're done. The divorce proceedings moved quickly after that. Lila and I agreed on terms without further conflict, settling the financial aspects fairly and without drama. The lottery money, initially a point of tension, was resolved with Lila keeping her share and ensuring the kids were provided for. After the divorce was finalized, we each moved on. Lila took some time to focus on herself, working through her mistakes and starting fresh, while I found peace in knowing that I had chosen to let go of the past. We didn't become enemies, but we no longer needed to be in each other's lives in the same way. Life continued, and in time, both of us healed. I was able to focus on my future without the weight of betrayal hanging over me, while Lila worked hard to rebuild her life. Neither of us found it easy, but we both found the freedom we needed to move forward, separately but with the hope that things would get better in the end. The ballistics report had finally come back, and it was the final piece of the puzzle. The bullets recovered from Eric's body had been traced back to the specific gun that had been found in Caleb's possession, an old model, registered under his name. It didn't take long for the detectives to connect the dots. The arrest of Caleb came after a breakthrough in the investigation, one that left him cornered and without an escape. It was late afternoon when the detectives arrived at Caleb's house. He had been under surveillance for a while, but there had been no concrete evidence until now. With the match between the bullets and the gun, everything had fallen into place. Caleb answered the door himself, his face a mask of confusion as he saw the two detectives standing in front of him. He tried to hide the nervous twitch in his eye, but it was hard to conceal his unease. Officer Mitchell, a seasoned detective who had been working the case from the start, stepped forward. Caleb Madsen, we need to talk, Mitchell said, his tone even but firm. Caleb's pulse quickened, but he tried to remain calm. What's this about? He asked, attempting to sound confident. We have evidence linking you to the shooting of Eric Lambert. Your gun was found with the same ballistics that injured him, Mitchell said, his words slow and deliberate. Caleb's mind raced. He opened his mouth to protest, but the words stuck in his throat. How had they found the gun? He had been careful, hadn't he? He thought he'd gotten away with it, that no one would connect him to the crime. But here it was, his mistake, his arrogance. And now it was all unraveling. You're under arrest for the shooting of Eric Jones, Mitchell continued, his partner stepping forward to cuff Caleb's hands behind his back. Caleb's heart pounded in his chest as the reality of the situation hit him. He was being arrested. The consequences of his actions were finally catching up to him. Caleb didn't fight back. He couldn't. The evidence was too strong, and the more he thought about it, the more he realized there was no way out. The smug confidence he had once held onto evaporated in an instant. He was no longer in control. As the officers led him out to the patrol car, Caleb's mind wandered back to the events that had led him here. He had pulled the trigger, fired the shots, thinking it would be the perfect way to take Eric out of the picture. He hadn't intended to kill him, but injuring him, well, that was another story. But it didn't matter. The law didn't care about his intentions. It only cared about the evidence, and the gun had tied him directly to the crime. The ride to the station was silent, except for the occasional hum of the car's engine and the sound of Caleb's breathing. He felt a strange, almost suffocating weight pressing down on him. The walls were closing in. As they arrived at the station, Caleb was taken through the back in trance, away from the prying eyes of the press and public. Inside, he was booked and processed, the reality of his situation settling in deeper with each passing moment. He wasn't the one in control anymore. He wasn't the one calling the shots. He was the one in cuffs, the one facing charges. Caleb sat in the dimly lit jail cell, his back against the cold concrete wall. The harsh fluorescent lights buzzed above him, casting an unflattering glow on his sharp features. The sound of heavy footsteps echoed through the corridor as a guard passed by, his keys clinking loudly. Caleb barely looked up. He was too lost in his own thoughts. The world had been turned upside down for him in the span of a few weeks. In court, his smug smile had faltered as the evidence was laid bare before him. The star witness was none other than Lila herself. She stated how Caleb had once discussed killing Eric, but it was never a serious discussion. It was proven that Lila had no direct connection with the shooting and Caleb acted on his own without her knowledge. The prosecutions also highlighted that it was due to Lila's support that the cops could have Caleb as a man of interest and then did the investigation. Lila was responsible for the arrest of Caleb. The once confident Caleb now stood in a prison cell, facing the consequences of his actions. But now, he was just another number in the system. His first few days in jail had been a mix of confusion and disbelief. But now that reality had sunk in, he had become the target of everyone's frustration. Caleb's smugness didn't help matters. It only fueled the anger of the other prisoners, who saw him as a symbol of the system they despised. It didn't take long for the beatings to start. The first time, it was a group of men in the shower. Caleb had been standing there, his arrogance still intact, when one of them threw a punch. It connected with his ribs, and before he could react, another blow landed on his face. They surrounded him, their fists raining down as he tried to protect himself, but it was no use. They were relentless, the fury of 1,000 frustrations directed at him in those few moments. The second time, it was in the yard. Caleb tried to keep his head down, his eyes darting nervously around, but he couldn't escape the looks of contempt. One inmate, a massive man with tattoos covering every inch of his skin, approached him slowly. Caleb tried to offer him a smile, but the man grabbed him by the collar and slammed him into the brick wall. The pain shot through Caleb's body as his vision blurred, and he could taste the copper of blood in his mouth. After that, it became a daily ritual. Caleb no longer walked with the same confident swagger he once had. His face was swollen, bruised, and unrecognizable. His eyes had lost the gleam they once had, now dull and resigned. He spent his days trying to keep a low profile, but even that couldn't protect him. The jail had become his personal hell, and every moment felt like an eternity. In his solitude, he couldn't escape the image of Eric, lying in his blood, staining the floor. Caleb had been the one to pull the trigger, but now it felt like the world was pulling the trigger on him, and he realized, far too late, that some actions were impossible to undo. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.